Good morning. As we come to worship this morning, let's take a minute just to empty our minds of the week's trivia, the week's life, and to focus on God. Our opening hymn is number 132, Immortal, Invisible, God Only Wise. Well, I wonder this morning if you were asked to describe a kangaroo, what would you say? Would you, for example, talk about what it does, or would you talk about what it looks like? So I've got some photographs this morning. So there's a very cute one. It's a mummy and it's got It's got a pouch on the front where it protects its baby, and the baby is called a joey. Can you imagine what it would be like to have a pouch just below your stomach with something that's moving around continually? How awkward it would be if you have to lie down, for example. And there's a picture of the mother and baby lying down. It's quite cute, really. Or would you talk about what it does? So how many joeys were in that pouch? You put your fingers up to show me? Oh, well done. Do you think that would be worse than having just the one? Now, for the benefit of the congregation earlier, I gave away some balloons, so later some very young people in the congregation are going to see if they can practice being kangaroos. Okay? So I can see we've already started. So they can eat even when they're in the protective pouch, you see. The face of the kangaroo, the young kangaroo sticking out the pouch. But here's the cutest photograph of all. What's it carrying? You got one of these? Nod your head if you have. Yeah. So there's a story associated with this particular kangaroo, or joey, and sadly its mother died at birth. Now what usually happens at that point is that another kangaroo will adopt the baby joey, but in this case, this particular joey refused to unite with any other mother, and instead, when it was picked up from the Australian bush, it had found a teddy bear somewhere, and it just wouldn't be parted from it. So it's like, who's got a comfort blanket, or did you carry a teddy bear around with you? My daughter had a teddy bear that she called Molly that went absolutely everywhere with her. But her friend had a comfort blanket, and it was all about feeling safe and secure. And so this teddy bear obviously makes this joey feel safe and secure. And you know, there are lots of animals who protect their young and make them feel safe and secure. Here's a picture of a swan with some cygnets in it, all crouched under the wing of the mother. And that made me think of a Bible verse from Psalm 91, which says, "Whoever goes to the Lord for safety, whoever remains under the protection of the Almighty, can say to him, 'You are my defender and protector. You are my God, and in you I trust.'" And over the last few weeks, we've been talking about Ruth. And isn't that what Ruth did last week? To go to Boaz and ask for his protection. So today we're going to continue to talk about Ruth and about this protection that she has received from Boaz, or receives from Boaz and from God. Let us come to God in prayer. We'll say the Lord's Prayer afterwards, and you can find that in your hymn book at page 652 if you wish to look it up. So let us pray. Lord, as we share in worship, we give thanks for all that you have given to us, for the protection that you offer us, for the life that you give us. Let us open our hearts and our minds to know more of your unconditional love and care, and be ready to share it with others. Hospitable God, extravagant provider, we worship you because we can. You take our inadequacies, our limitations, and you pour out your blessings upon us. We stand in awe of you, sensing your presence among us. We are overwhelmed by your kindness, and we fall at your feet. We thank you for forgiving us when we make mistakes, when we've not shared what you have given to us. We come to the cross knowing that we are healed and forgiven, and given a second chance to be the people that you call us to be. We thank you, Lord, that you go ahead of us into our communities. You are there pouring out your generosity and hospitality in our neighbourhoods. We thank you that you are transforming our homes, our streets, our places of work, our lives. You are transforming us so that we can play our parts in your kingdom. We thank you that we can come together as one, sharing all that you have given to us. Lord, today we come to be fed by your words, to be protected under your wing, and to be strengthened by your love. Bind us together now, Lord, as we come in your name to pray as you taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who have sinned against us. Save us from the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours forever. Amen. So we're about to hear the first part of the story of Ruth. There'll then be a hymn which we'll sing the first couple of verses of, and then we'll hear the second part of the story of Ruth, and then we'll sing the rest of the hymn.
Reading this morning comes from Luke chapter 4, starting at verse 9. Then it was announced to the elders and all people, These be your witnesses that I have brought from Naomi all the property of our Lord, Helen and Harley. I have also applied the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with this property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today we are all witnesses. Then the elders and all those at the gate said, We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your fold, like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. They were standing in Ephrathah, and in famous in Bethlehem, with the offspring, the Lord gives by the gentleman, named Charles like that of Parish, who Tamar bore to Judah. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left me without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in the old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And then is the family line of Parish. Parish is the family of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Amminadab. Amminadab the father of Nashon. Nashon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. Obed the father of Jesse. And Jesse the father of David. Let's have Joseph read from the school book.
We just continue. So this morning I'm going to meddle a little bit in your family affairs and risk offending with this question. Which of you has felt cheated out of a family inheritance? I'm so sorry to ask this question. It's an emotional journey, but it's relevant to the story of Ruth. So has anyone felt cheated out of a family inheritance? This week I was told of a scandalous situation which happened right here in Scotland on our doorsteps. In this family there are 2 grown-up children, a girl who's the elder and a boy who's younger. Following the father's death when he was only 17, the son pretty much took on the running of the family farm. Since then, more than a decade has gone by, and for the last 5 years, the son and his wife and children have been living in the farmhouse which he grew up in, and they've been caring for their ailing mother. The original will was drawn up shortly before the father's death, and it divided the family farm equally between the 2 children on the death of the mother. But since then, the older sister has married and gone to live and work in England. About 3 months ago, sensing that the mother was dying, the son had a new will drawn up and had his mother sign it. In it, the family farm and most of the assets were now being left to the son, and the sister was only getting a small amount of cash and her choice of some of their mother's jewellery. To make matters worse, the son didn't bother to tell his sister either about the new will or indeed a few weeks ago about their mother's death. Unfortunately for the son, his sister still kept in touch with some of her school friends who are continuing to live in the area, and they sent condolences to her, and she was able to get to the funeral. But I'm very glad I wasn't a fly on the wall afterwards when the will was found. Sadly, this is not uncommon in our world today. These stories often come out when families are planning funerals, and it's such a painful situation when this happens. Often the most painful thing isn't the loss of property itself, but the feeling of hurt and betrayal that's left behind. It's the idea that you've been ignored or sidelined, and it's very painful. And we learn from our reading of chapter 4 of Ruth that this is essentially what is happening to Ruth and to Naomi. But there's also great hope and new life as we hear how God is working through all the different relationships that we've learned about so far in the pages of the story of Ruth. We hear of about at least 3 different situations of new life in this chapter, and I'll deal with each in turn. First of all, we hear about the injustice which is taking place at the end of chapter 3. We read about it last Sunday. The next of kin who should be taking care of Ruth and Naomi is using Elimelech's land for his own use, but he's not sharing the proceeds or the profits with the widows. The next of kin is never named, but Boaz knows him as well as everything about Ruth and Naomi, and the fact that Ruth has been gleaning the fields to keep herself and Naomi fed. Under Jewish law, it was the duty of the next of kin to care for the widow in the family. Boaz knows this, and the whole town knows it too, as well as the fact that he'd not been fair to Ruth and Naomi, this next of kin. Someone wasn't doing his duty. Someone was ignoring his own family, and everyone in town knew it, but nobody was saying anything. Until this point, it is Boaz is looking after the women out of the goodness of his heart. I just love how Boaz masterfully handles the situation. It's so brilliant. He brings all the injustice to light casually and then claims his bride, the woman that he has grown to love. So he takes the whole matter to the place where disputes were handled in those days, to the front gate of the city, where people gathered and sat and discussed life. And basically on his way there, he called his friends to meet him at the gate. And when everybody was gathered, he convened the equivalent of a court hearing. He begins by asking the next of kin if he wants to buy the land that Naomi is selling. Interpreters of this text say that the next of kin, the unnamed one, was probably already using the land without paying any rent and without fulfilling the obligations, as I've said, to care for Ruth and Naomi. And he'd probably been doing this since Elimelech left with his family during the famine. So Boaz asks if he wants to buy the land. In front of all the witnesses, the next of a kin agrees to buy the land, but when Boaz continues and he brings up Ruth and how this transaction would involve caring for both Ruth and Naomi, something the next of kin would have known about before this moment. And so they are at the point where the next of kin has to publicly refuse to take on the responsibilities. This names the injustice and brings it into the light, even although everyone else knew about it. Boaz is calling the next of kin to be accountable for ignoring his responsibilities to the members of his own family. And when the next of kin then refuses, it gives Boaz the opportunity and the blessing he needs for his marriage to Ruth to go ahead. So Ruth and Naomi had been ignored and left destitute by their closest of kin. A very painful situation to be trapped in, for sure. Boaz, after Ruth's bold proposal to him, ensured that there was justice for them, and that was there in the new life for him and for the family. The second new life is a fresh start. We hear of this for Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. It was a long journey to new life for Naomi. If you remember back to the first chapter, Naomi was empty and bitter and close to breaking point. When she and Ruth arrived in Bethlehem, Naomi tells her friends and relations not to call her Naomi, but to call her Mara, which meant bitterness. She was bitter because she had lost her husband and her 2 sons. And even although Ruth had come with her, even although Ruth was standing right there beside her, she still announced to the world, as it was, that she had returned empty. But by the end of chapter 4, she's had a complete transformation. Naomi, who couldn't realize the blessing of the presence of God, can now see that God was present all along. Ruth, this foreign woman, had God working in her life. The same women who heard Naomi's cries when she arrived back in Bethlehem are now the ones rejoicing and pointing out the new life given. They say that the child born to Ruth is a restorer of life, and he will look after Naomi and Ruth in their old age. And they rejoice that Ruth has shown unconditional love to Naomi, and it has transformed her. Naomi has gone from having no name to having her name restored, and descendants redeemed and restored. Sadness is transformed into joy once again. Ruth's journey takes her from being exploited and being ignored to being embraced and loved and revered. The other kind of new life that we see here is Ruth marrying Boaz and the beginning of their life together and the birth of their son, which leads us on to the third new life. Ruth is finally given value and worth and status. At the beginning, we aren't even sure that Naomi wants Ruth to come with her to Bethlehem. And when the women arrive in Bethlehem with Ruth in tow, the women arrive in Bethlehem, Ruth has to stand there beside Naomi, ignored, unnamed, as if Naomi weeps and laments to her friends about how badly off she is. Imagine Ruth's thoughts as Naomi doesn't even see her, or the sacrifice that she's made to leave her home and her family to travel to Bethlehem. Naomi says that she's returned home alone and empty, despite the fact that Ruth is standing right there beside her. In our reading today, the next of kin, whoever they were, didn't see Ruth's value or worth at all. And when the inheritance of the land comes with the responsibility of caring for this foreign woman, that's too much. He values not the person, but the land. Ruth was someone in her day who wouldn't be seen as a valuable asset. She was a foreigner, she was a widow, she was a woman. And yet, here at the end of the story, even the women of the neighbourhood proclaim that she is worth more than 7 sons. And that was high price indeed. And because of Ruth's boldness, God works through this family, and she becomes the matriarch of the kings of Israel, relative of David and Solomon and many of the other kings that followed. Later, she is one of the few women listed in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel. Ruth, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, is someone whose lowly estate is lifted up and whose true value is recognized by God. The story of Ruth highlights our worth through God's eyes. Each one of us is a precious child of God, claimed in the water of baptism, even when others don't recognize it. New life can be seen in this story because it sees value in someone who's an outsider, someone who's an immigrant. Ruth the Moabite in Bethlehem was valued in God's eyes, along with other women like Tamar, the mother of Perez, who played a crucial role in God's salvation story. It is my prayer that we will all grow in our ability to claim the worth and value in ourselves as children of God, and that people see the worth and value in us in this community and from the world beyond. And so we conclude this wonderful gem of a story this week, this short story that explodes with so much meaning, beginning in tragedy and ending in great joy. This story reminds us that God fills us with new life, even when we feel at our most empty and hopeless. It reminds us that God is working to bring justice to the unjust situations, that God is healing the brokenness in all of our families and throughout of the whole of the world. It reminds us that we're never alone because God is always with us, working through us, working through others, even when those others are unexpected people from unexpected places. Finally, the story reminds us that the value and dignity and worth of each person is really important. Even when we disregard the value of ourselves or others, God still gives us the amazing worth and gift of being a child of God. So let us give thanks to God for the new life that we receive from Him again and again and again in so many different ways. As we listen to some music, let us focus on this story as a whole and let God speak to us through our thinking. So we've finished looking at the book of Ruth, but there's so much more that we haven't touched on. And I found out this week that the Scottish Bible Society has been publishing on the internet these last 10 days or so daily messages. And if you would like to participate in that, you can collect a little slip of paper which gives you the address to go to. You can set it up so that it comes to your own email address, or you can return there day by day to read what it says. I don't know how many days, but when I looked this morning, they were at day 19, so they've managed to find 19 things to say about the book of Ruth, and it still goes on, so I would commend that to you. We have a couple of intimations to mention at this point so that we can remember the family in prayer. So Jean Daisy McGlashan, is that how you say it, McGlashan? Of 11 Fotherfield. She apparently has been ill for some time, but she sadly died on the 20th, so a few days ago. Her husband Jim died some years ago, and they have a married son called Ronnie, who unfortunately has a handicapped child, this message says. I'm sure the child, who is unnamed, leads an enjoyable life nevertheless. So we commend that family to you in prayer. And can I remind you that the box for the food bank is still at the back, and it will be, anything you leave there will be taken to the food bank in due course. We continue with our prayers for others.
Let us pray. God of love, provider of our daily life, God of life and love, we thank you for the gift of your Son Jesus, living bread, broken and shared for all. We thank you for surrendering in the service of your kingdom. We thank you for the endless overflowing grace that knows no bounds, even as we seek to minister to your last person. Lord God, as you heard the cries of your people in the wilderness and fed them bread from heaven, as we remember how Jesus set the people with words of justice and compassion, lead us today as we pray for our world. We pray for those whose daily food, water, and proper shelter goes unmet, and for those misusing what they have in the way self-gratification. We pray that they will too have a sense of justice and fairness, that they may stand firm in the belief that the decent life should be for all people. We pray for those whose lives have been broken by violence and crime, conflict and struggle. We pray with courage and anticipation of a life beyond barriers which hold them back. We pray for those who are sick or sorrowing, and those who care for and console them. We pray especially for those who know personally who are facing difficulties at this time, and who need in a time of silence. Fill them, Lord, with your holy presence, and remind them of your promises. Pray for those who have lost faith in themselves and in you, and who struggle to find true meaning in life. Help them focus their eyes on you, Lord, and give them hope for a new day. We pray for ourselves that we might be filled with energy to serve you better in our daily living, and that we might, even in our doubt, be reminded that you will never turn away from us or abandon us. May we always look to you as the one who gives us life. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Our closing hymn is number 465, Be Thou My Vision, and note that we're missing out verse 3. Lord, help us to remain thankful for even the simple things of life. Keep us focused on your loving, generous nature so that we can freely share what we have and who we are. Let us be cheerful givers and humble receivers, that all may have enough and be satisfied. May we receive your blessings today, tomorrow, and forevermore.